Good morning, everyone! On this blessed morning, my son decided to use up last of cherry to make another serving tray. This is the last one of the season for him, and soon new things are being cooked up, I promise. As first step, he used Mitre Saw to cut cracked ends off. He did one side at night and one in the morning, because he thought the other side didn't have cracks since it was too dark to see, and then in the morning he noticed that there actually were cracks. Following that, he proceeded to use Chisel to remove the outer bark off. Since it is cold and winter here is long and harsh, although not as harsh as it used to be, the surprising lack of insects was very welcome in the bark removal. It's like all the insects just up and fled or somehow hid inside the bark. Not that my son cares. He does use his hands often to tear off easier pieces of bark. Sometimes hands remove a lot more than a chisel would, mainly because chisel cuts the bark off, but with hands you can pull a whole strip of bark off, especially a bark that has been thoroughly dried by the cold winter. Once the outer bark was sufficiently removed, my son put 60 grit sandpaper on the sander and proceeded to sand the inner bark off. Some aggressive sanding removes it all and shapes the piece nicely. Not to mention, if one of the sides has been damaged by a chisel going too deep, you can always use sander to smooth out the damage marks from the chisel. When doing this step, do make sure to wear a good mask. Inner bark is insanely powdery and very sticky, so it will go up your nose and stick there, or even worse, get in your lungs. When the bark was completely removed, he proceeded to plane the whole thing. Thankfully, this wood was not warped, so there was no need to use wedges to fix things up, so a few very aggressive passes over the piece removed any imperfections from top and bottom. I was surprised that the knot in the corner didn't shatter from such aggressive planing, especially because this piece was so dry. So now that the general shape of the piece was ready, it was time to sand. Starting from 80 grit going all the way up to 800 grit. At 80 to 120 grit, my son made sure to round up all the sharp corners and remove any scratch marks or imperfections left over from chiseling and planing. When it comes to serving trays, round corners feel a lot more nicer to the touch than the sharp ones, especially considering the fact that the boards are already heavy enough, and once you put more weight to it, if you try to carry it with one hand, those sharp corners will dig into your hands. Whereas smooth, nice corners will provide more and better grip, but keep in mind, they do tend to get a little bit slippery at 800 grit. And now you get to experience what oxidation does to cherry wood. This piece was extremely dry. It drank a lot of oil, probably most amount of oil out of any wood I ever saw. But 3 layers of oil per side was still enough. 3 very generous layers of oil. As you see, cherry is pretty white looking when dry, but once it starts drinking oil and oxidizes, it turns a beautiful shade of orange. Not as beautiful as olive wood, but considering the drastic color change, I still think it is pretty cool. And as the last step, it was time to give it a nice shine by waxing the piece. You first want to apply wax, and then set your sander to the highest speed setting and very slowly move it on the board to heat the buffing pad and wood up and melt wax so it creates a nice bond with the surface. I would have liked my son to move it a little bit slower, but I can't complain. The piece did turn out stunningly good. And that's it, it was ready. Let me know what you guys think of it. If you enjoyed this as much as we enjoyed making it, please do consider leaving a like and maybe subscribing. I try to release a video every week. If you have any comments or questions, those are very welcome too. I promise to respond as fast as I can. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week. Bye bye!